think we are there. All righty. Well, hello, and we are joined today by Tom Hopkins. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm good, Ken. Good.
This is quite an honor. So everybody out there, they'll normally hear me say that this is Ken Lundeen, the host of the B2B Sales Summit, but I am just absolutely thrilled to death to have you on board today. So thank you for coming.
Well, my pleasure. Love to teach.
Good. Well, let's talk. Let me go ahead and jump in here and let me embarrass you for just a second about some of your accolades. So when you look at this, I can tell you personally that Tom Hopkins, from a standpoint of my sales career, has been incredibly influential. I go back in the days, and I've been doing this for about 25 years, and I would often think of Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar, as two of the people that absolutely influenced my career from the beginning. He's been training millions of people across the world for nearly 4+ decades. And the reason that people come to him is because he gets results, which get deals done. And I think the part I love the most about this is that it also gets you happy clients. So with that being said, Tom, and your 4 decades of experience, can we just kind of jump in here and let's talk a little bit?
You bet.
Well,
I'm ready.
Well, let's talk. So there's a couple things that are interesting to me as I make my way around when we talk about the sales process. Everybody wants more leads, right? No matter where you go. But I think we do a pretty darn bad job of qualifying and working that front end or the top of the pipeline. Can we start with there a little? Talk to me a little about qualification and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's a real lost art in the field of selling because too many people that go into sales aren't given an actual provable formula to qualify a person. So years ago, I sat down, I said, okay, I want to come up with a formula that anyone can memorize quickly, they can deliver, and they'll do a much better job, not only in making more money, but in helping the buyers do the right thing. So I decided, what can I use as an acronym? And Ken, I have been an acronym fanatic all of my life. I believe if you can get a good acronym, it'll help a person quickly remember the steps. And so I said, what acronym can I use for qualification? And so I came up with the acronym NEADS, but I have it spelled NEADS. Okay. And the reason I spelled it that way is each letter, NEADS, is one of the steps in the qualification process. And I'll quickly go over it if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
I think the listeners will really enjoy it. And I have so many people that write me and call me and say, Tom, I've listened to all your CDs, all your stuff, but the one thing that's helped me the most is the qualification sequence using the NEADS formula. So the letters stand for this. The N stands for the word now. And what we mean by now is there's a general rule that if you show me your past buying habits, it'll tell me a lot about what you'll do in the future. It would be not always true, but it would almost be like if I were in automobile sales. I work for a beautiful dealership and have wonderful new cars. And all of a sudden I'm there on the floor waiting for the next person to come in or call. And in drives a certain car. And of course, I watch it come in and park, and they come in. Well, of course, if they are looking for a car, I am going to really analyze what they have now, because the vehicle they bring in will tell you an awful lot about what they'll do in the future. It's the same in real estate. When I was in real estate for 8 years in the residential market, I would spend quite a bit of time having them totally mentally tell me about the existing home. Let's say they moved from another state, and I would say, I'd love you to tell me about the home that you sold to come here. Did it have a large lot, small lot? How many bedrooms? Is that still adequate? And I would totally almost have them paint a picture of their last situation. Now, it's not always true. This guy comes in a 10-year-old car that's kind of beat up. And
he doesn't want to buy a 10-year-old car then, right?
Right. He walks in And I greet him, of course, and he says, "Hey, did you see me on television last night?" And I say, "Well, no." And he says, "I won the $21 million lottery." Well, see, now you can just throw the in out the window because that 10-year-old vehicle has nothing to do because he's had a drastic financial change. So that is part of the now.
Yeah.
If they haven't had a drastic change, you can weigh a lot of weight on the existing situation or what they had last. And there's a truth. Some people listening right now might be in business to business sales, where they market their business machines, copiers, or whatever to companies.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, there's a lot of similarity to that, that if you find out the existing situation as to the products that the company owns, it will tell you quite a bit about what they'll do next.
Yeah.
Not always true, but these are guidelines. I always try to say, hey, nothing's 100% sure every time,
Yeah.
but one of the goals in selling is to up your percentages of success.
Yeah.
So that's the now. The past shines a pretty good light on the future.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying that now gives you a framework for, hey, this is how the decisions were made because these were the things that were important.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and of course, if I were marketing business machines to a company, once I isolated the decision maker, I would simply ask them, I would say, Ken, what's the process the company goes through in acquiring new business machines? Because see, almost every big company has a way they do it. And if you know the game, you can win it. So
Yeah.
I always like to know the now as to what their process is.
Yeah. So let's not bring cleats to a basketball game, right?
Exactly. All right. So the E in need stands for enjoy, meaning once I know what you had in the past, there always are a thing called hot buttons in buying anything. And it's like, I want to know the hot buttons of your past decisions.
Mm-hmm.
What did you enjoy most? Now, Tom, I noticed, Ken, when you drove in that you've had that car for a good number of years. And obviously, back when you purchased it, there were things that excited you about it.
Right.
And I'm curious, what were those enjoyable things in that vehicle? Or I used to do the same thing in the home. Or in a real estate say, I would say to the wife, Mary, you lived in that last property for 5 years. And I know there were some things that excited you when you first purchased it and then lived there. And right away she goes, oh, yes, we have a fireplace in the family room. And that was a highlight in our life to be in front of it. Well, all of a sudden I'm getting an enjoy that's very important. I had one instance in all my 8 years selling homes where I had one couple come in and I said, what do you really enjoy? And the buyer said, there's one thing we have to have, Tom, and that's hardwood floors.
Yeah.
We won't have a slab. Well, believe it or not, in this whole area, there were only one little area that had hardwood floors in thousands of homes.
Yeah.
And luckily there was one listed, and I took them to that property because they were just so insistent, Ken, there's not going to be a home without hardwood floors.
Yeah.
Well, they bought a home they really didn't like. And it
Yeah.
wasn't the home, it was the hardwood floors they bought. And by the way, we'll keep the property. So
Yeah.
there are these enjoys that are very, very strong.
Yeah, I think so. Let me step back for a second here. So talk to me a little bit of that in the B2B sales, side of it. I'm talking to somebody within the decision-making process from a B2B sale. How would I go about engaging them on on the E?
Well, let's say they were looking at a new copier. And of course, copiers are up to $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 today.
Yeah.
So of course, their copier is 5 years old. And this guy or gal, thank goodness, happened to be part of the decision-making process. And I, of course, try to get them to go back. And I said, now, we have so much new, wonderful things in our copiers.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, has your company enjoyed about the copier? Have the people been able to use it properly? Everybody happy with it? And of course, yeah, she might say, oh, the speed. and the reliability has been very good. So I'm just picking up little nuances, if you will,
Yeah.
that'll help me direct them to what I think they'll say yes to and write a check for.
Yeah.
Now in needs, spelled NEADS, the A stands for the word alter, which really the word alter means change or improve.
Mhm.
So my next thing I want to find out is, in considering a new whatever, what would you like to alter based on what you had in the past? What would you like different? What would you like to change? Because many people buy a product or a service, and there's always one or two things they wish were different.
Sure.
So I want to find out those alters, those changes or improvements, which is the A in the needs. Then of course the D stands for the word decision maker, meaning many people in sales give all this information to a person who can't say yes, but all they'll do is take it to someone else.
Right.
So I always said, and of course, the people right now watching us or listening to us, they need to ask this question very nicely. If we're fortunate to have a product that satisfies your needs, who other than yourself would be involved in the final decision?
Right.
See, what this will trigger is, if it is business to business, they may say, well, we usually put a committee of three together and they all do the research. And so we'll have more than myself looking at what we're going to do. So now I know, okay, I got a committee, so I'm going to handle this whole presentation and closing of the sale differently.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the S in need stands for solution. I am in the solution business. I try my best through now, enjoy, alter, decision maker to find out what the real solution to satisfy your need is,
Mhm.
which is when I'll choose the product or service that'll be the one most acceptable, be the highlighting what you're looking for, and so forth. But I will say, Ken, the folks watching this, if they'll just take and write down NEADS and start asking the questions, as I mentioned, they will be delighted with how much more qualified people become and how they'll save a lot of time by finding out what they need to know sooner.
That's fantastic. I think the other interesting thing is we like to, time is of the essence, and especially today, it also sounds like that process. We always talk about qualifying, right?
Right.
I really think qualifying is get them in or out of the pipeline. I don't care which, right? Yes or no is just about.
Exactly right.
So that's great. Well, that's a very good piece where we talk about needs. Acronyms stick. I was talking to Patricia Fripp the other day, and she said specificity builds credibility. And so I think as we go through and have real conversations like that, it helps the salesperson because they have a specific methodology they're going through to help somebody. I think that also sets them up for success in that way as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, perfect. So talk to me a little bit. So I think you'll admit that the only downside of what we just did is it said that we have a totally compliant, might be the wrong word, but we have a completely compliant prospect who's, you know what, Tom, I'll give you all the information you want about everything, right? So, the one of the biggest questions I get when I'm out coaching and training people is the idea of objection handling.
Sure.
So talk me through how you handle and teach to get people better around objections.
Well, first of all, one thing I learned over the years is the average consumer of any product or service won't buy and say yes until they usually give you some type of no. In other words, they almost have to slow down the buying pace. They almost have to help you rationalize the decision for them. And so I learned over the years that some of the toughest buyers are those that never give you a no, which is an objection.
Right.
And I learned over the years that I'll probably have to have some type of no before I get a yes. Now, oftentimes you'll get a money no, possibly in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, say I've got a husband and wife, and I start, the husband set this appointment with me. And right away we sit down, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, let me just thank you for the time we're going to share. And suddenly the wife goes, Mr. Hopkins, I got to tell you right now, we don't have any money.
Right.
And so we're not buying anything. Well, see, right away, some salespeople will go, well, that's the end of that one.
I'm
No,
out.
I would simply smile and say, well, first of all, Mary, our company is an educational company, meaning my job tonight is to give you some ideas to educate you what we do and how we've served many, many happy families. And I'm here, and this is my life, my career. So I don't mind. And let's not talk about money. Because if we can't financially make it work, well, we can't possibly serve you. But maybe we have a way to do that. So can you open your mind? Let me just continue with my presentation. How's that sound to you?
Yeah. Would you, in a B2B environment, would you redirect? How would you alter that? It doesn't sound like you need to much, but
No,
you
just
know,
tune it up a
the
bit.
stiff arm in B2B, right? Oh, just give me the price. Oh, just give me the features.
Yeah, you'll have people like that in business to business. They're busy, and all they want to do is get right down to the bottom line facts. Now, one thing you can do, which is a wonderful option, is you can, in essence, blame the management of your company for why you have to give them the information.
Mm.
And of course, everybody you're talking to has someone above them, a supervisor, a manager. And so in business to business, I may say, upper management of my company is going to grill me when I come back and ask me what I shared with you. I want to keep my job. I have a wonderful family, and this is how I support them. So if you wouldn't mind, if you let me go through what I have to go through, I'll be as quick as possible. But you'll be happy, I think, when I give you some of the information that upper management's almost insisted that
Yeah.
I share with you. Will that be okay?
Yeah, that's great. I love how you empower them, tell them why. I'm a big believer in saying because or so that, because they'll understand the journey you're trying to take them on.
Because they're probably going through the journey in their life one time or another.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So I apologize. So I interrupted a little bit on the, front end kind of objection money thing. Talk to me a little bit more. I think we all see the money objection, and partly because it's in our own head, and so we just let it come. But talk to me about some other common objections.
Well, I learned over the years that today everybody wants a bargain. Everybody wants to try to feel that they took advantage of the situation. And many of them will, when you go into trying to close the transaction, the sale, right away they say, well, it sounds pretty good, but I'm afraid it costs too much.
Right.
Well, see, if they fight the price, they're really interested in going ahead, or they wouldn't even fight the price. So
Right.
by them saying it's a little higher than we wanted to go, it's not in our budget right now, in a way, I'm happy to hear that. And
Yeah.
of course, if they said to me, Tom, I feel it's a great product, but I think it costs too much, I would just say these words, John, today most things do. Can you tell me about how much too much you feel it is? And for example, if I were selling swimming pools and the average pool today is $40,000, where back many years ago, they were 10 or 20.
Yeah,
So a
back when
lot of
I was
people,
slogging it away in Phoenix, Arizona for my stepdad's pool company in Apache Junction. Man, I remember those days.
well,
197,000 degrees outside.
and the pools were very inexpensive compared to today.
Yeah.
But many people get blown away. They buy a new home, it doesn't have a pool. Living here in Scottsdale or Phoenix, Arizona, you almost have to have a pool. So they call Paddock or one of the big pool companies, and they, have the guy come in and he goes through everything and hits them with the $40,000. And of course, they are knocked out. And they may just say to you, Tom, we had no idea that we'd have to spend that kind of money. And of course, our job in selling is to take whatever they say as an objection and find a way to help them rationalize going ahead and showing them a way to overcome it.
Right.
So let's say if they said to me, Tom, I think it just costs too much. Well, again, I want to find out a figure. Everybody today is somewhat amazed at what is charged for our pool or any pool. And I'm curious, John and Mary, to have the backyard as beautiful as it will be when we finish, about how much too much do you feel it is?
Yeah.
See, now they're starting to think, well, let's see if we can get a pool for less. So they say to me, well, we weren't going to go over 35. So our hesitation is $5,000. Is that right? And they now say yes. So now I've boiled that objection to an amount of money.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I'm going to say, now listen, if we stretch and you find a way to let us put that pool in, may I assume you're probably going to stay here for at least 10 years?
Right.
Oh, we'll probably never move. Well, let's look at that 5,000. So for 10 years, you're looking at $500 a year, which is what you're paying to have the appreciation and value of the beautiful pool, your children not going to the mall as they become teenagers, but bringing the kids over to that backyard where you can watch them. Oh, so what we're looking at then is about $10. Well, if it's 500 a year, then we're looking at about $10 a month. It breaks down to about $1.15 a day. Do you think we should avoid all the benefits of the pool for, gosh, less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks? So this is a way of helping people rationalize it. I used to, when I went into management and real estate, I had 18 salespeople, and I made them memorize, in essence, how much every $1,000 based on prevailing interest rates a home was per day. So that if a person said it was 5,000 too much, it would be $1.25 a day, so that my people could help them rationalize the money. Not only that, when you do this, Ken, usually if there's two people involved, one is more leaning towards going ahead than the other.
Yeah.
And by holding out this type of incentive, the saving of money, the daily amount, they'll jump in and kind of close the other person for you.
Well, and I think so. You're doing something great here, and I know that I've seen it work. I've used it myself. But the big thing is, when I train sales forces or when I talk to people, what I get a lot is, oh, it was just too much, and they think that they're trying to overcome the idea that the project was 300,000.
Right.
And what you did is you said, well, how much too much? And now all of a sudden we have something we can talk about.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Exactly true. And selling is negotiating, of course. And I one of the things we haven't talked about is if you have a foundation with people, primarily where after a while their defenses are coming down because they just like you.
Yeah.
They trust you. And I found that if I had this relationship feeling with people, that many of them would stretch their financial goal to get my service because I did do a better job. And that's one thing I will say. You have to have a beautiful presentation. You have to know the art form of not only talking, but asking lots of good questions. And of course, all these things come together to where you help people because of who you are, not just your product or service, to want to be one of your clients.
Yeah, it sounds to me, if you'll expand on this just a little bit, but it sounds to me like you're really hearkening to the idea that you have to be okay serving, that you have to want to and have a desire to be liked, to be known, to connect with people. Today's 140 character world. Like we're just trying to go, but what you're talking about is really connecting. Am I reading that right?
Oh, yes. And I found, again, that by the way you come across in the beginning, I always thank them for the time we're going to share. I also try to get them to relax by saying, I hope we can consider this time somewhat exploratory, meaning my job is to share with you information about our dynamic company and then see if we are the company that earns the right to serve you and your company or your family. Right. And I really try when I train salespeople, I know, Ken, we share this, is think of serving and not selling, and you make a lot more sales. And I think you have to have this service attitude. And of course, my last year in real estate, I would say 95% of the people I found homes for were referred to me by other happy people who I found homes for. Right. And that's what'll happen if you create this relationship to where they feel you really care more about them than making the sale, and that you follow up, you keep in touch. I really believe that this is an important part of selling,
Yeah.
Many people in sales make a sale, they're off down the road and they don't keep in touch with that buyer. And I did. I had a follow-up system. I tried to tie in every holiday with something. Um, Halloween, I give out pumpkins to my clients, and there they didn't have to go to the store and get a stupid pumpkin. And
Yeah.
for Thanksgiving, I would always send out a beautiful Thanksgiving letter. 4th of July, I would put a little flag, American flag, in front of their home. When they come out in the morning, I put 500 out one year, and boy, they'd all come out. There's their little flags waving, and my little card on top. Thank you for letting me serve people in this area, which is where my real estate office was.
Right.
So, the old saying, "Give and you will receive," is so true in life,
Yeah.
but also in the field of sales and marketing.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way we manage salespeople today, and with the complexity, it seems like deals are taking longer to get done, products are more complicated, yet we're trying to compress the amount of time for somebody to hit quota or to hit a number. I think sometimes we have to just understand that in order to speed up, we have to slow down, and
Well, sure. And one thing, objections are triggered when they feel you are trying to sell them, or if you come across like the stereotypical salesperson. And that's why there are words, and I hope our folks enjoying our time together will realize that there are certain words you want to eliminate. For example, if you're selling a product, don't say the word "the price is," because when they hear the word price, the subconscious says, let's talk to some other companies and see if we can beat it. So always call it the total investment instead of the word price. And you'll be amazed how much better you do. Or some of you I know, I'm sure, finance your product or service, so you might get a down payment. Don't call it a down payment. Call it the initial investment. And don't call it a monthly payment. See, everybody has too many monthly payments. We
right.
call it the monthly investment. And if you have a printed form, which many people don't in these days, but if you do use any paperwork, don't call it a contract. People just freeze when they think of it. Call it the agreement. People love agreements.
Yeah.
They just don't want to get on a contract.
Yeah, last thing I want to do is have to get my lawyer in. Hey, for $300 an hour, I'll. Yeah.
Right. And then don't ask them to sign it. Mom and dad said don't sign anything. Ask them to okay it or approve it, authorize it. It's amazing how saying these type of words lower this 4-letter word enemy called fear, and their defenses come down to where you have a better chance of making a transaction.
Yeah. And as we go through, I'm reflecting on some of the things you've said. You bring up the word fear. And so I think that's, probably has two applications for what we're talking about today. You're talking about right now reducing the fear of the customer or prospect. And I think at the same time, a lot of the questions and the things you're asking are very direct. And I think salespeople are afraid to be direct. Do you find that when you train people?
Yes, but I also found that if you have a rapport with the folks, if you've been referred to them, that's one of the reasons why it's so great when you get a referral. The defenses are down because they've heard good things about what you did for someone else. So that's why if you can prospect your way out of having to prospect to where you're doing business with a lot of happy clients and their referrals, there's a lot less fear with a salesperson. But I found over the years, I went to a seminar when I was just a kid, and the guy in teaching, one of my mentors, he says, do what you fear most and you'll overcome fear. And I thought about that. I thought, my gosh, I've been kind of afraid to ask, afraid to move forward. And I found by making myself do it, Ken, I reduced the fear, started making more money. And when you know what to say when they say what they say, there's a lot less fear. And of course, you make a lot more money.
Yeah, and those are both fantastic things.
Yes.
And it's great because once you overcome and let go of that fear, you understand it. Just do it a couple times. I would implore people who are watching this, use needs, ask the question about money, clarify how much they're missing. Some of the things that they may not do today, Do it 2 or 3 times and find out that the worst thing that happens, is there isn't a worst thing. You either get somebody to say go away or you get them to tell you the answer, right?
Exactly. And selling becomes so fun when number one, you kind of really know what they're going to do and say,
Yeah.
and you know what you're going to do and say, and then it's kind of like a tennis match. You know where the ball's going, you
Yeah.
take it back, and yeah, I had wonderful 8 years, and in fact, I even today I had a seminar in San Francisco a while back, and this guy comes up to the stage, and I didn't know who he was, but he says, "Tom, I'm so and so. You don't remember me, but about 40 years ago, I went into your real estate office, and my wife and I wanted to rent a home, and you were so insistent that we don't rent, that we purchased because of the what's going to happen in California real estate. And we sure enough did buy the home. But I heard you were in town, and I wanted to come by and thank you because 40 years later, we're retiring and we have almost $450,000 of equity thanks to you not letting us rent." So
Right.
these are the type of things that make me so happy when I have people come to the seminar and they say, "Yeah, you were really affecting my life," and they bring their kids in to go through the training as they become young adults, and yeah, it's been a fabulous cycle of teaching people how to make money and have fun doing it.
Yes, that's great. Well, so I want to get into something that, let me just ask you a question.
Sure.
Is the art of closing completely dead? Everybody, that's what I keep hearing, that nobody knows how to close, or that you're not supposed to close, or that social media is supposed. I mean, talk to me
Well, first of all, uh, the art of closing the sale is probably one of the most misunderstood parts of the selling process. And that's one of the reasons many years ago, I told my company, and as I've written 19 books now, I've said we are going to have a major thrust in the proper way to help a salesperson close a transaction, close a sale. Because the top people still, the fundamentals of it have not really changed.
Mhm.
Granted, a lot of little differences in our culture have changed, but I believe the art of the qualification, the needs, and then moving into the solution of the product that's best for them, and then using the rapport building technique to where you have them like and trust you. And when you're ready to get started, just asking them to, why don't we draft up our feelings on the paperwork and see how it looks? And I always tried to get salespeople to say things in a way to lower the pressure.
Okay.
Um, Something like this, over the years, Ken, I found that investing in any product or service is only as good as the facts. And we right now aren't sure where we're going. I know that. But I thought we might draft up our feelings and the facts, take a look at it. And if it makes sense, I'm excited to work with you and your company. If it doesn't, well, that's fine too.
Mhm.
But would it be all right if we put it down and took a look at it? Well, then, of course, many of them will say, "Well, we'll do that, but we're not signing anything."
Right.
I always smiled and said, "I know, and believe me, that's the last thing I'll ask you to do," which is true. It's at the end when everything else is filled out. It's the last thing.
Right.
But it's so fun when you do have the ability to call for a decision, and there's steps to it. Um, I'd love our people right now with us uh, to just try this little one thing.
Yeah.
When it's time to get ready to make a sale, just ask this little question: "Ken, how are you feeling about all this so far?" See,
Hmm.
I'm not asking you to buy.
Right.
I'm asking you to tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
Now, that question many times, Ken, will get them to open up to you. Many of them will say, "Well, it sounds pretty good. We aren't going to jump into anything, and but it sounds pretty good." And I then would simply say, "Well, over the years, I learned that by looking at the facts and seeing how it looks makes sense. So why don't I go ahead and let me fill out our agreement? And if it makes sense, we'll do business. If not, that's okay too." And upper management really wants me to do this, and I love my job. So let's go ahead and do that, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I love what you're saying because it's really about starts in qualification with your needs process, comes through with how do we handle and help them see their way to rationalization through the objections. I believe is there a when you start talking about closing, I mean, let's dive a little deeper into it because
Good.
even when we talk about just it's a process, people still want to come to the moment, right? So talk to me the other thing. So
Okay.
beyond you filling out the agreement, tell me a little bit more because I know you've got hundreds of thousands of hours on this stuff. So talk to me a little bit
Well,
more how you see and view closing and how we can be more successful.
sure. First of all, uh, closing the sale is learned by making yourself attempt to do it and get an instinct for it. Meaning, in other words, there's an old saying I've taught all my life: I will learn to close a sale by making myself close too soon and too often.
Yeah.
Thus, I'll develop my own closing instinct.
Right.
And that's what you have to develop in selling, your own instinct. And of course, again, it's so fun for me to have people come up and say, yeah, well, I tried that and I was scared to death, but
Yeah.
I made the sale. And so I said, do you still do it? Oh yeah, every time. So, a lot of our ideas, techniques, strategies, people have to kind of take and adapt and try to say, I'm going to try that. It's just like that little question, how are you feeling about all this so far? Just a great little way to almost test where they're at.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, when they say it costs too much, today most things do. Can you tell me about how much too much you feel it is?
Right.
So, all of these little things you and I are discussing are money makers for people that'll do the thing called application,
Right.
which take some notes off of this program and apply them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I love how it's a process. It's about getting them along the way.
And the process of closing the sale, Ken, it really starts the moment you make contact. Meaning, just a couple ideas.
Yeah.
First of all, people judge you visually when they first see you. So it's important that based on what your product or service is, that you dress appropriately. Now, if I were like, say, for example, selling golf clubs, I definitely wouldn't have a tie or a suit on because it's not appropriate. If I were doing financial services, where I am working with people to create their financial independence, and this is a big, big area, then if I were going in, I would have a tie at least minimum, or shirt and tie, because that's what they expect. I had one man who was very successful, one of the highest income salespeople in the United States. And of course, he said that I dress like my banker would dress because that's the person people take advice from,
Right.
and that's why he does it. So I guess the dress and look is important. Also, they then not only judge you how you look, but they judge you verbally, how you sound, what you say. So we're in the word business in a way, how we come across, and we're in the visual business, how we look, how we handle people when we first meet them. But the closing of the sale begins that moment they meet you. How do they feel about you? Do they feel comfortable? Do you relax them by letting them know that you're there to serve them and ask them some great questions? And in other words, do what we've covered so far in our short time together. And I think if they do this, they'll not only make more money, their companies will have more profits. And this is a win. And free enterprise and capitalism, which is what our beautiful country is based on profit generated by companies that pay taxes because they're making money.
Yeah.
So in a way, the 11 million approximate salespeople in our country are very fundamentally important to this overall economic situation in our country.
Yes, that's great, Tom. It's interesting there are so many, you talk about the 11 million people in sales, and there's a lot of pressure on in the world of sales that kind of the people who aren't adding value, those jobs can be displaced with all this technology. So we're in this interesting flux where I think, we'll trim off some of the people who aren't adding value. It's programs like this that'll help them. So tell me, if I'm, as the millennials as an example, enter the workforce, and they're here, right?
Right.
Enter, and there's plenty of people who are that under 5 years in sales. We're trying, may not be getting the leadership or training they need, but they're trying to figure it out.
Sure.
Tell me, what advice would you give to me if I were relatively new in sales?
Well, first of all, I have people on talk shows like this. If we have call-ins, I have a question often asked: where can I make the most money in selling?
Yeah.
And I always say to them, that's not how you should judge the company or the product or service you're going to sell. I think you have to find something you really love as the business. Meaning, in other words, I love real estate. I think the reason I did so well in it was I really believe that it's the backbone and foundation of most net worth wealth in our country, the ownership of property and real estate. So you've got to find something you have a passion for.
Right.
And that P word is so important. You've got to be passionate about what you do. Then when you do go to work for a company, if you're somewhat new, do some research, find out who the top income earner is in the company. And because I learned one thing over the years, that the top people are willing to usually to help newer people get started. And I did this. I found the top real estate agent in California. She was gracious enough to let me go with her on appointments.
Right.
And I watched and listened. And thanks to that, I just adopted a lot of what she said and did, and became a top producer myself. And also, it's important that you also try to find management where you really are comfortable with them. I feel that if you feel good in an interview with an owner or manager that's going to be above you, that's a big part of doing well when you're somewhat new. And then, of course, master the product. I think you need to be able to answer almost any question that'll ever be asked about your product or service. Because if you fumble with an answer or act lacking confidence, this radiates to your buyer, who feels pretty much exactly the same. They're nervous because you're nervous.
Right.
So these are some ideas that I think they can apply. Fall in love with what you do, because if you love what you do, you'll never work.
That's awesome. Well, great. Well, I appreciate all your time today, but I guess kind of the last question I would have for you. So after all this great advice, and they want to learn more about Tom Hopkins, where would they go to find you?
Well, one thing, Ken, if they go to tomhopkins.com, they go to my website, they can go to a thing called the free resource page, which is a page of things we give away at no charge,
Yep.
and they can enjoy that. And then, of course, any of the other books or CDs, they'll find them there if they're interested. But also, of course, I still do seminars. So if they go to my website, they may come and visit me at a program and come up and say, hey, I was on Ken's show with you, or I saw you. So that would be super.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I know sometime right after this summit airs, Tom does have a live event. So make sure you get over to his website and check it out. So I guess at this point, what I can say is thank you so much. This has been an honor. And as one of the people I've looked to throughout my sales career to help me figure out which way is up. And you have helped add thousands upon thousands of dollars to income in my family and in my home. And for that, I say thank you very much.
Wonderful, Ken. All the best to you, and look forward to hearing of your continued success. Thank you so much.
That's great, Tom. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.